Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Tonight, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my brother from the Fatimiya Sufi Order, Brother Stephan Beyer, who always returns and gives us intriguing and educational topics which no one else dares to cover. And I'm always honored to have Brother Stephan in my corner, who's always been a true and faithful brother and friend. And I'm always appreciative of his wisdoms and insights because he is one who's connected to the source through his heart. And those that are connected to source, they do give us true divine wisdom. So I thank you, my brother. And with that, Nur alaikum and welcome back.
Alaikum Nur. So the topic we've been discussing has been related to the news and some of the false narratives we've been noticing. So I was asked to do this topic, including on anti-Semitism, because there were a couple of speeches that we'd witnessed, and there seems to have been sort of a repeating format where it's already set up. So the speeches often are a Palestinian or an Islamic woman or speaker is unaccomplished to graduation at either high school or college, and they have a tendency to talk about the challenges they've gone through in their life. And part of that problem has been the stateless diaspora of the Palestinian people. This is a huge challenge for them. And the media and the American political climate being what it is, we don't want to hear about this. We're not interested in hearing about that challenge. That's not what our leaders want us to be thinking about. It's not useful to the American system at present. So almost right away, these women and their totally legitimate criticisms and their life experiences were dismissed as somehow being anti-Semitism. So I've been trying to figure out how to unpack that, how to unpack the narrative so that I can be a better ally and support people who live with occupation. I think that if we let the system do the talking, we are going to wait forever for freedom and peace, and the planet will be dead by the time we can have freedom and peace. Freedom and peace isn't enough, by the way. We need to save the planet in addition. So with that rather big wind-up, I wanted to discuss some of the craziness I've seen in the news a little bit more recent. So the Archbishop of the Church of England, I love his reasoning on this, but he has declared, we're going to pretend this is a fatwa. The Archbishop has issued a fatwa that Israel is not anti-Semitic, or Israel is not apartheid, and essentially thereby claiming it's anti-Semitic to say otherwise. His logic and reasoning here is just over the top hilarious. The reason why he's dismissive of Israel being apartheid, he doesn't go to anything about, the facts on the life of the settlements, settler-only roads, the draft-in situation where people are forced as children to enforce this, whether they want to or not. He doesn't care about people's lives and their experiences. No, he cares about paperwork. You see, Israel is not apartheid because their constitution says it's not. Now, here's the thing. Neither Israel nor England actually even have constitutions. It's really kind of an American thing to actually bother to write it out. Constitutional law in both England and Israel is a little informal. They have constitutional courts, kind of. They don't have a fully formal constitution. So the idea that Israel, which hasn't ever completed a constitution, or England, which deliberately doesn't fully have one, is saying that, well, their constitution doesn't admit that it's apartheid, so therefore the paperwork isn't card-carrying Nazi. Anyway, I think this has to do with the establishment of England wants to back a certain narrative. and they want to give Israel the time to make deals on its own. And they're very reluctant to criticize Israel, no matter what Netanyahu does, and no matter how he destroys the country. Which, I mean, if you've looked at Israel lately, there's big problems with how it's being run, and who knows how it's going to go. So the other aspect of this that I thought was weird, that's been in the news recently, is Abu Mazen, or Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian people. He made some interesting statements to members of the Fatah organization that have been roundly criticized, and the specific remark that I think really upset people is he claimed that the Holocaust, or the German crimes against the Jewish people during World War II, was something to do with Jews' social roles, and then he mentioned something about money. Now, this is actually a reference to Karl Marx, but he does a horrible out-of-context reference to Marx. Marx is sort of a materialist, so his view of religion is what's materially happening on the ground. So he's dismissive of both Judaism and Christianity. And what Marx was essentially saying is that Christians are the same as Jews at this point because they're all capitalists. He's dismissing, our God is now money. So there is a, this was a incorrect use of Marx to prove the wrong point. And I would say that multiple things, I'm not really sure what the motivation of the speech was. I mean, I'd like to have solidarity and ally with Palestinians and with the Palestinian leadership, but I think the entire speech has a lot of problems. One of the other really bizarre things he decided to go into history was the conversion of the Khazar Khanate, and he sort of misrepresented European Ashkenazis as being primarily Khazars, as opposed to there just being some intermixture with converts. This is a really odd thing to bring up. He seems to have been trying to downplay the political power of anti-Semitism as a weapon. But I think dismissing anti-Semitism is not the right way to go. It does not help Palestinians to ignore that Germans committed crimes against Jews in World War II. It doesn't help Palestinians to downplay European racism at all. This isn't going to help liberate anyone, quite the opposite. So I feel like tactically he was wrong on everything that he was trying to do in this speech, and it was counterproductive. I think it's very sad, but at the same time, this is a man who lives under occupation. He's living with other people who live under occupation. So I try to give him the benefit of the doubt as much as I possibly can. But when you go down the wrong narrative, it's a dead end. And there's at no point does helping Palestinians mean that you should embrace any talking point used by an anti-Semite. It's not the way that everything about racism and supremacism is from the devil. It's not of God. It's an icon of negation. You cannot use that in a good way. From a Lord of the Rings perspective, like fantasy allegory here, think of it as the lure of the ring. There's nothing good there. It's only destructive. It doesn't help. So that's not the right way to be upset about the settlers or the actual facts about apartheid that the Palestinians are living under. Calling out the apartheid system that helps the settlers disenfranchise the locals, the natives to this land, is an important thing. I wanted to talk a little bit also about various forms of anti-Semitism and some of the narratives about it, because I think there is a little bit of confusion, particularly when people are critics of Israel and they're seeing Israel for what it is, settlerism, colonialism, and imperialism. They have a tendency to be vulnerable if they don't understand the talking points used by Nazi anti-Semitic bastards who we don't need. Um, so I think the real risk here is that Israel gets power from anti-Semitism. By studying Israel's history, you will notice that Israel tried to pretend to be Arabs and blow stuff up in Egypt. They blew up a American ship and tried to pretend it was Arabs, but the ship had the bad taste not to sink. And America worked really hard to pretend it didn't happen and ignore that we were attacked. So there's the Lavon affair, the USS Liberty incident. Israel has a history of dressing up as Arabs and trying to make anti-Semitism more prominent. They get power from false flag events and from false narratives. So we don't want to empower oppression and settlers, so we've got to confront that. So some of the ways they can get power from this involves a little bit of passive aggressiveness. They actually, remember, Israel was allied with South Africa. They gave people who had a constitution that said they were apartheid a nuclear reactor so they could make nuclear weapons. That's what happened. White supremacists and Zionists used to get along really, really well back with Rhodesia, South Africa. They saw themselves as natural allies. Now, nowadays, everybody wants to pretend that never happened. But there's a reason why colonialist settlers have a tendency to align with each other. Just as we see the nationalists aligning with Trump sometimes in other countries, you see people who rule by fear and division find sort of somebody else that they can do business with if they find someone else who works on this fear and division. So some of the narratives that are used by anti-Semites that are particularly ridiculous, there's some ancient aliens and Nephilim tropes that often get used. There's really nothing productive about this, but there's an attempt sometimes to create this ridiculous caricature of anti-Semitism and then try to use that for political power. So for an example of this, I kind of suspect Kanye West is doing this because Lord only knows what else he's doing. Maybe he is crazy, but Kanye West seems to be attacking Jews in a way that only empowers them. Like, he's not made any criticism of people of color are living in refugee camps because of Israel. For some reason, that's not a concern. His concern isn't Israel drafts Jewish children and turns them into soldiers. That's apparently not his concern. His concern seems to be a couple of Jews might be rich in the music business. Now he's a musician, or at least he claims to be. So there is a influence, I would say, of the military in Hollywood and the music industry, and a lot of people who are reluctant and cowardly about calling out the military have a tendency to pretend that the influence in Hollywood and the music industry that they don't like is somehow Jewish. The military has an alliance with Israel, and we have a tendency to, train their military, share equipment, and back each other. So these false narratives can be very effective. Remember, it was Anthony Weiner's laptop that gave us 4 years of Trump. Comey, the leader of the FBI, and you'll see how this was sort of played into. It didn't really have anything to do with protecting children, but by creating hysteria around Anthony Weiner, we got 4 years of Trump. So we can expect some sort of fake news and false scenarios to influence our next elections as well. The incident I'm most afraid of has to do with supporting white supremacism. If you guys search for Democratic councilwoman post selfie after being carjacked, you'll probably find an image. I'm trying to figure out, did she have a filter on when she took this image? Like, did her phone literally have a filter to try and cover up blemishes? Because, I don't know, it looks like trauma makeup to me. Looking at the image, I feel like if you're going to do propaganda and fake news and not have it go down like the Reichstag, where everyone knows it's fake, you kind of got to do better. This was, like, it really kind of looks like, maybe that's going to come out as the official story, is that she had a selfie filter on, and that's why it looks like this. But it's pretty evident to me that the blood splatter is not legitimate. It seems to be some sort of trauma makeup. I don't know if you've ever been to a first aid meet or seen haunted houses, but there are people who are artists who are very good at creating the appearance of injuries. Well, whoever did this one might want to get some lessons at a haunted house, because it wasn't great. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. And if I'm wrong, there had to be a filter used on her phone, because there is nothing correct about this image. You look into this girl's eyes, look at her smile, and look at the pattern on her face, and also look at her statements. Look at how this was a prepared, ready-made agenda. So this doesn't directly relate to anti-Semitism, but violence against women and children also is something that, will get people to rally around, circle the wagons, feel like they're under siege. You're bringing back the causes of the last conflicts and great world wars, and, that's going to get people wary right away. So, for instance, World War II was actually started because Hitler claimed blondes were being raped in Poland. That's what he used as his justification. He almost certainly, by the way, lied. He made it up. He wasn't in the process of telling the truth. But enough people believed it, and it wasn't challenged, so they could invade Poland, and from there onto the Nazi-Soviet pact. So what this woman is claiming is she wants children to be locked up more, basically because the scenario that's presented is a carjacking and possible youthful offenders. She's basically creating a statement that is very calculated to create political capital for locking up minority youth and keeping minority youth locked up without a trial. Now, since this seems to be a Reichstag event, I mean, maybe her filter was on for the selfie, but the image does not, I mean, on its face, it just doesn't look right. And what that means is that this was essentially done in coordination with the elements, probably with the Fraternal Order of Police, or some sort of secret clandestine security test a la Ken Trump, where his organization has been known to occasionally do fake emergencies to test, he's admitted this, to test how security reacts to them. I think he admitted that after, it was the Nebraska drill at the Catholic Charities, where there was a fake shooting, and there was also a fake drill shooting at a mental hospital, I think in Wisconsin or Michigan. So the government has used contractors to occasionally do these security test drills, and when possible, they use them for political capital. which is incredibly disturbing in a democracy, because if the people are reacting to fake news, it's like the people don't really have the power. So anti-Semitism can be looked as something similar to this woman's blood on her face. It can be used to create power for the wrong cause in a case that creates supremacist violence against vulnerable minorities. This woman is essentially creating a situation where you can lock up minority people and you don't have to really care if they're guilty or innocent because they don't get trials right away. Something similar is going to be happening in Palestine, where Palestinian activists are going to have their rights railroaded. They're going to get locked up very quickly. And part of the reason is people who would stand up and be their allies feel like they don't have a voice because they're afraid of discussing this rather important political issue. I mean, perhaps I'm wrong about Kanye West and he's really mentally gone nuts, but it seems like he's actively being anti-Semitic in such a dysfunctional way that he's only going to create more power and more influence for keeping Israel from being criticized legitimately, which the Archbishop totally, I mean, his paperwork defense is got to be amazing blindness. Hey, I guess since England doesn't even have a constitution completely, it's not a constitutional monarchy either. Since Israel doesn't have a constitution, I mean, it has basic law, which was intended to be built into a constitution, but they never finalized it. So there is no, and it's like, well, gee, neither Britain's not really an empire and Israel's not a colonialist state because it never finished its constitution. It's like saying this hate speech isn't hate speech because I didn't punctuate it. Paperwork doesn't affect reality. I think what Karl Marx in part was saying when he was discussing Christianity and Judaism, he's basically saying that, you know, he's reducing this stuff and saying it doesn't even matter. You know, if all you worship is the dollar, that's your one God. And it doesn't matter. He basically says Christians or Jews now, they're all the same. Under the current system and power, we're all trapped until we get liberty together, freedom together, and save the planet. It's really the only option. So simplifying Karl Marx and claiming he says something he didn't say and actually attacking Karl Marx for anti-Semitism is kind of hilarious. He was not a self-hating Jew. He was writing against somebody who was anti-Semitic during this statement. So they totally took Karl Marx out of context. And that's often done by, you know, that's a problematic issue. Karl Marx was right. I can say that with a lot of confidence, by the way. Workers of the world absolutely unite, and religion, while important, needs to be looked at from a materialistic angle. What's happening in the world now, so that when religion is used in an oppressive manner, it can be confronted. The system will constantly hide behind religion and division if we let it, and it's doing this in bad faith. So that's the news as I see it, and what the major passive-aggressive fake risk is right now. So if you see blood on a woman's face from a selfie, I don't know, remember the Reichstag. I don't want to give her name or say anything about her as an individual. I don't know why she's doing this or what she gets out of it, but she's created capital for putting kids in jail who are minorities and vulnerable. So shame on her, and shame on everybody in the system who tries to use trickery and hucksterism to disguise Israel's abuse of Palestinians. Once again, they're putting children in cages. And also shame on Israel for putting their own people through the draft. It's my responsibility to protect the children, both Palestinian and Israeli. Part of my mandate is to protect the youth of all people. So all children should be protected. Nobody should be forced to go to war. Nobody should be forced to protect a settlement. That's absolutely disturbing. So if you really support Israel and the draft, if you really support Israel, support the Palestinians' healing and reconciliation. And if you really support Israel, well, I don't know anybody who supports Netanyahu. Israel needs help right now. It's going through transition, and it's a real chance for progress, but it takes progress does not happen without effort, without sacrifice. And if we let the strongman jerks make the rules and set the news, you know, we're going to be in the same place. Just a lot more people will be dead. And then it'll go on 4 years from now the same way. So look through the lies. And yeah, when somebody's saying that they've got some event here that justifies a new reign of terror from the police, if they're trying to justify putting people in cages or forcing children to become soldiers, they probably are using fake events to create political capital for that. So look closely at the events and ask, did that even happen? Like, does somebody take a selfie and post it after being carjacked? And does it look like, yeah, just do what's right, and when the truth comes out, things will go well. I guess that's what I have to say on this topic. Have you noticed any stories or things in the news that interest you?
Yes, Brother Stephen. Thank you so much for this insightful talk that you have given in terms of the current events that we're dealing with. And you're right, my brother, in this age of chaos that I believe from 2020 through 2029, there will be so many psyops and divisions which will be there to divide us as a human family on race, religion, politics, etc. And we wish the best for all humanity. And it's like what it says in the Holy Quran, Surah 2, verse 62, that it's not about you being a Muslim, Christian, or Jew. As long as you're a good, righteous person and an upright person, then God will have mercy on you on the day of judgment. So just like how you care about Palestinian children, you also care about the Israeli children who are being, against their free will, being drafted into the military to continue this continuous cycle of hatred and division. And I mean, the Israelis are also known for their false flag operations, like you pointed out. Many people, however, have looked, if you remember the dancing Israelis in 9/11, how they arrested a lot of these Mossad guys near the George Washington Bridge who were there to do what they wanted to do over there, but they got caught in time. So the dancing Arabs who were celebrating were actually the dancing Israelis, and then they just got shipped right back to Tel Aviv, and nobody ever heard of them again. So these psyops are there, my brother, to divide us. And it's, look at it now. Now where the war on terror is over, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, all of those wars and conflicts are out of the way. What damage has any of that done to the image of Islam? And we see more Americans now reverting to Islam more than ever. And it's because people made the effort to know that all of this was lies, whether it was Afghanistan for the opium, for the drugs, and that opioid epidemic affected people here. And we all knew somebody we went to school with, that we worked with, that overdosed on opium because of that war and the repercussions that it had here in the West. Same in Iraq. What did we gain out of any of that besides tragedy on both sides, where U.S. troops here who thought that they were serving their country, they got duped into the military, came home with PTSD, bodily and mental injuries, and people on those sides, innocent Iraqis who had nothing to do with 9/11, paid the ultimate price. So this continuous, and look at the media too, because they were all repeating during 2002, anthrax, 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 and then they had people
Was the
mentally
word of the day.
prepared. Exactly. So they had people ready to accept that, okay, now we're going to go and invade innocent people who had nothing to do with this incident. And see, it's fear-based mind control. As soon as we approach the month of September, everywhere you'll start seeing signs. If you see something, say something. I've been noticing that a lot here in the Pennsylvania area, in the tri-state New York, New Jersey area. Like if you're driving on the highway, you're going to see these signs because that's fear-based mind control. Anytime September rolls around, it's always going to be incidents involving a plane. It was recently an incident where somebody had diarrhea all over the plane and they had to revert the plane. I believe it was going to Barcelona or Atlanta. Please excuse me if I'm not correct, but it was a biohazard incident that the pilot had reported, and they reverted the plane back to the destination. So these kind of things usually pop up around September. Things like see something, say something, involving planes, involving prisoners escaping from jails and things like that, putting
Mhm. There
fears
was
in the
one in
mind of
England
people.
and one at the same time. Possible drill event. It does sort of look like a potential security test.
Yes, that's right.
It's I'm expecting France to run one soon. Um, if not this weekend, then next week, possibly to justify their dress code in their schools.
That's right.
And also with France's former vassals having military coups, they're going to be just concerned about blowback. So the chances are France will have a drill because when your colonial vassals all go through military coups
Yeah.
and your response is to restrict women's clothing, to dominate your former colonial vassals and keep their identity from being public, um, you 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 don't really have much option other than to lie. So fake news is really the only place France has to go. So we are expecting imminently something ridiculous out of France, something that will kind of have the narrative already wrapped up. Like this woman's selfie, the narrative is already wrapped up. Put
Yeah.
poor people of color, children in jail, lock them up. That's the narrative there. The narrative from Palestine is Muslims are terrorist and insane cult. We gotta side with civilization and lock them up. Whenever you get this type of um, bypass your thinking emergency, like the narrative is already in the news story. The event's too perfect. It already fits what it's supposed to be politically, kind of like Anthony Weiner's laptop, which just 4 years of Trump. Thanks, Comey.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
FBI.
that's right.
So, now we try to say, oh, anybody who says anything about the deep state probably is pro-Trump. I don't know if we want to call the FBI the deep state. Talking point wise, we can just call it the FBI, but the FBI influenced our election blatantly. So these things
Yeah.
can and do happen. This situation with the selfie seems to be a Reichstag event, and Kanye West's entire political campaign is nonsense. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not helpful to a single person of color. It's not helpful to a single Palestinian. It's not helpful to a single Israeli child who doesn't want to join the military. Everything he does is wrong. And he's friends with Nick Fentis, who is a absolute known. Nick Fentis essentially has advocated for more killing. He wants undesirables who might have Tourette's, which I happen to have. I'm only able to do this podcast, which was delayed because I couldn't get treatment 1 week. It was horrible. I didn't control my body. I was shaking. I had tremors. Like when I can't control what I say, I can bite myself hard, full force. So I can understand if somebody doesn't know that I have Tourette's and they see that happening in public, they might be scared. But the last thing they need is to be encouraged to be violent when you see a problem. If you see a problem, your first reaction isn't, well, this is an undesirable I can take out of the gene pool. Well, unless you're Nick Fentis, that is apparently his first reaction. I'm referencing the subway in New York incident. There was a man who was choked to death by a military-trained individual. And Nick Fentis has basically come out in his anti-Semitic eliteness and said, well, that's great.
Well, I mean, it's so unfortunate because he has like a Hitler mentality, right? Hitler did the same thing in World War II, where he, along with the Jews, he sent people that were disabled, people that had issues mentally or physically, to the concentration camps. So this guy is
Yeah,
advocating for the same.
Hitler had eugenics. The justification, they had a tendency to kill anything weak,
Yeah,
anything that diabetics. He would have probably hated my father because my father is diabetic.
yes.
Um, like that type of stuff that I mean, it's just disgustingly dehumanizing. I'm aware as a disabled person, people, don't value disabled people the same way. I don't work currently. It's been a couple years since I worked because of my Tourette syndrome. I'm kind of the opinion that my life is worth living. And even if I can't support myself, society giving me the minimum of Social Security and disability allows me to advance treatment for Tourette's. We developed a new treatment. So I helped create that with my doctor, and it works. So we decided to work on the premotor cortex,
Mm.
and um, like that's an advancement of human knowledge. So
You're
it's
making a difference, my brother, in the lives of so many people, and you, uh, God Almighty, has placed you on this earth at this time, in this specific timeline that we're living in, and you are making a difference in the lives of so many people in terms of the Tourette's research, the treatments, other people who are suffering and feel like their life is not worth living anymore, and this time of calamity that we find ourselves in. So you are one of those lights that is holding this world together, and I thank you for that. I really do, from the bottom of my heart.
I want to mention two. This is sort of a self brag, but I just want to mention a little bit of who I am and why I'm important. So, probably the most important part of my work has been to find Wahid Azal and to support him. Some of the things that make me an interesting person in that project is my feud with Dale Husband actually preceded that of Wahid Azal's. And the other huge thing, other than noticing that icon of negation, was finding you, a friend and a brother. And you have been so wonderful. And I think of the brothers, the sons of Ali, Hassan and Hussein, how they had a guide from the generation before of wisdom in Salman the Persian. And this was a remarkable individual. And his attributes in many ways, when I study history and when I look at him, I see an echo. I see somebody who would have been on the right side, somebody who would have been a companion of Ali and not on the side of those who wanted to kill him and his children. I see somebody who clings to what's right. And you have a remarkable heart. Your connection to nature, you're one of these companions to the light. And I am so glad that if there's one good thing I've done, it's to help to support the FSO and to bring about the change, because freedom and peace are not enough. Workers and everybody, whether you have a job or not, needs to take a stand to protect the planet, to protect nature, to protect each other. We all depend on winning. All right.
Yes, my brother, definitely, and I'm truly humbled and honored, and it's amazing that in this journey we're all just walking each other home, and we owe this love and light to one another. We come through this human life, and we go through the things that we're going through, and I believe in our lifetime, as long as we continue this great work, we will hopefully see the fruits of change take place within our lifetime. And we just all individually, we all have to contribute our efforts, depending on what you're good at. Do something for humanity and volunteer and help in whatever capacity that you can to address the issues. We won't be able to solve all of the world's problems, but if we all, community by community, start in our own individual way, then little by little we can be these beacons of light that branch out all over the place. And that's the beauty of the NUR FSO and us coming together. And a part of that is educating the people about these psyops that are being played against them in the news, in the global politics, especially what's going to happen rest of this year, and how next year 2024, how critical that is. So people have to be prepared for psyops, for drills, for anything that divides them on race, religion, politics, climate. There are endless scenarios that can end up taking place for the rest of this year and next year, and that's going to change the direction of this country. Because me being from Pakistan, my brother, I have noticed that whatever happens in America impacts the rest of the world. So if America is in a stable place, then my home country will be in a stable place. Other places will be in a stable place, because America is that modern day Rome that we're dealing with. It is the modern day Roman Empire. And if everything's okay at the main base, then at the main foundation, then the rest of the infrastructure will prosper as well. So it's like many of my cousins from Pakistan, they ask me, hey, what can you do to help me get to America for a better life? And I tell them, I said, hey, all the stuff here, high inflation, people struggling from paycheck to paycheck, aspects of crimes in major cities, corruption in police forces and military. I said, you're not escaping anything by coming here. So if you can make things better in your country, that can help you as well in terms of the long-term vision that we're dealing with. And a lot of these colonies, that's another thing that even in Israel that we're dealing with, it's not about just being Jewish, because a lot of those, the Jews that are there in Israel, whether it's African Jews or Sephardic Jews, they get discriminated as well. So it is basically, it makes sense why they were friends with South Africa, because they both shared maybe that aspect of racism, and how they basically put those Jews that are non-European or non-white in the front lines of battle and in other menial positions over there in Israel, while the other society prospers in terms of their settlements and taking land from the Palestinians and so on and so forth. So it's basically the same song and dance, my brother, whether it's in America, in England, in France, in Israel. It's basically the same dragon, but with four different heads. So people have to individually come together, because the people of France or the people of England, the people of America, the people of Israel, like the good people, because good and bad you will find everywhere with duality of nature. So the good people all need to come together, and they know that their governments do not represent them. And this is what I have educated people to, that people think the concepts that, oh, America is doing this to the world, or they're doing that to the world. And I tell them it's the government, it's the people that are the policymakers. It's not your average American who's just like you, struggling to take care of his family, trying to do the right thing. So our people that represent us, we have to make sure that the right people are in power. And like a lot of these alphabet gangs or the fraternal order of police, what they're doing with this lady and her fake makeup to ensure a police state, it's all psyops, my brother. And you're doing a great human service by educating the people to have discernment when something is presented in front of them. I cannot thank you enough for that.
This photo, I think it speaks for itself. Everyone is going to be seeing it in the next couple days. It's going to be everywhere. So I want to touch on one keyword that I think sums up a lot of what you said, and that's proxy war. So proxy war is a major issue, and this means with the UN Security Council fighting wars against each other. Ukraine's a good example of this. You see Russia and America backing different factions, and it's spiraling out of control. Countries are going to do this. China versus the US is going to be trying to get any country that they can divide. If they can divide a country by identity and get one side to fight for China and one side to fight for the United States, then civil war is coming to your country too. So unity, caring about your neighbor, and local action are a huge part of how we repair the planet, how we take care of each other, and how we're a blessing to the world. Because when there's civil war here in America, that civil war will be global. And when there's proxy war in Ukraine, when there's proxy war in Syria and Palestine, that brings civil war here in the United States. So this system needs to be called out for what it is. I would say right now, as bad as NATO and the West have been, the first impulse has to be stand with Zelensky, stand with Ukraine. The Russian invasion has to stop. Once that's over, there's a lot of clearing house we're going to have to do in the West to get stuff in order. But right now, any and all action to stop the invasion, to stop the ongoing killing fields and refugee crises is what's needed. When there's peace in Yemen, when there's peace in Ukraine, we will have peace everywhere.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, my brother. And that's what I say. The good people of all nations and tribes need to come together, not only collectively, but on an individual level. And we're seeing the same thing in all of the countries that are involved right now. In my home country of Pakistan, recently, there was a big upheaval because they removed the democratically elected leader of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who was elected by the people, but because of I think there were some reasons because he did not want to follow the U.S. foreign policy, and all they had to do was make one phone call through the ambassador, and they got him removed from power. So a lot of the people in these countries that are rebelling in Africa or in Asia or in other parts where, let's say, at one time they were a colonial power or they were a part of a colony or something like that. And Pakistan was part of the British Raj at that time when it was still a part of India. And if you look at the oath of the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, it tells you in his oath that I am the Governor General, and my oath is to King whoever at the time, His Highness, His Majesty, and to his heirs and his successors. So that foreign policy of Pakistan is still dictated by a lot of the elites in London. That's why all of the crooked politicians in Pakistan, they all run away to London, and they all take turns in looting the country and keeping the country in a third world status. So when you see people rebelling in that part of the world, or you see them rebelling in France, and France, and also in the French former colonies in Africa, because a lot of that stuff in terms of France still collecting colonial tax and looting the minerals and resources of the people, a lot of these colonies never really got their freedom from the British and the French. And people who are trying to find out, why do the British and the French always have a problem with Islam? This is not something new. If you go all the way back in history, since the Crusades and the colonization and imperialism of North Africa and the Middle East, it was always the British and the French. So you're not dealing with anything new of somebody that just doesn't like you. So this is a battle that's not new. It's still the same people fighting against the same people under the guise of different ideologies and memes and identities. But that's all. But the good people have to come together. That's what I say. If you're a good British person, you're a good American, you're a good Muslim, you're a good Jew, good Christian, because there's two types of people in the world. It's not about your race or religion. Either you're a righteous person or you're a devil that's there to hurt humanity. So if all the right people come together, regardless of race, religion, or country, then we can make a difference in this world. Because if one part of the world goes up in chaos, then that will affect us. If America goes up in flames, then that's going to affect the rest of the world. And right now, it is getting to that point where people have had enough in terms of inflation, not being able to survive, even if they're working multiple jobs, no days off. They cannot take care of their families. People have had enough.
So I think there's a dead giveaway that, and you have to watch out because the system will create a fake left. But in general, it's real easy to tell a good person from a bad person. And it's how susceptible are they to right-wing programming? Is a lot of right-wing program what works and what sells to those people is fear and division. The let's lock up all the kids who are minorities so we don't get carjacked. Right-wing people love that kind of justification where they're the good guys now. I thought for a long time that maybe you could salvage something and turn some of this into good, but as it's based off fear and division, as I said earlier, nothing good comes from that one ring. Metaphorically speaking, I'm using a fantasy novel because it connects with people and you know a little bit of what I'm talking about. But that type of evil use of identity in a divisive way doesn't function for anyone. It's absolutely dysfunctional and we don't need it. And people who are susceptible to that need to fix something about themselves. They have an issue that they need to fix. And until they fix it, they need to be resisted. That's basically over and over again, you get these right-wing people, they say, oh, I'm moderate. But then when it comes push to shove, they're quick to believe that face and say, well, maybe just for now, we need to make sure that those carjackers are locked up, even if they're kids who haven't had a trial yet. And it's like once you make a compromise like that, you're feeding the proxy war. I will say that there's also nonsense on the left. You'll find dysfunctional causes often used by the system to try and destroy the left. So for an example of this, there's sometimes sting operations run by the government at PETA. Now, people who actually care about animals have noticed that PETA is consistently a dysfunctional organization. Well, that's because the government uses informants because the government's right-wing enough to support the meat industry, and they treat PETA like it's a terrorist organization. So they send informants just like they do to mosques, just like they do to any place like a union, and they make these groups dysfunctional and they destroy them. So that type of caricature on the left you don't want to identify with, but the real heart of, caring about working people, caring about sick people, caring about disabled people, caring about people, and not just fearing things and being reactionary to fear and division. This is what divides a good person from a bad person. Good people care about people who are suffering. They care about people on the bottom, whether they're productive or not. They want to be helpful. If you look at people who are poorer than you and your solution is, how do we make them smaller and go away? That is not a good person response. That is not okay. So I hope I break that down so it's real simple and real easy. How you can know, is this person under the influence of the divine, or is he under the influence of an infernal guide? Nobody should be supporting right-wing talking points. Nobody should be supporting drafting the youth. Nobody should be supporting locking kids up without trials. All right.
Thank you, my brother. And I think I couldn't have said it any better myself. So if you have any closing thoughts to end this podcast on a good note, please.
No, that was pretty much my closing thought. I would just say that if you get a chance, anybody listening to this, everything good that I've said, in part was a learning experience. And thank God Wahid Azal had the time to talk to me, because I was going to settle with for freedom and peace. I'd given up. I thought, yeah, that's the best I can fight for. There's so much more than just freedom and peace. Don't settle for that. If you go for freedom and peace, you end up there's too many right-wing people who will appropriate those and use them for evil. So you got to look at the talking points, look who's using them, and look at the propaganda. And freedom and peace is not enough. We need unity. We need solidarity with the oppressed.
Thank you, Brother Stephen. And please, everyone, take heed to what Brother Stephan Beyer has taken his time out to educate us on this evening. It's for the future of all of us and our future descendants in the future. So please take heed to what our brother is saying, and please have discernment for the rest of this year, especially 2024 coming up. And with that, my brother, thank you, and Nur alaikum until next time.
Alaikum Nur.